The Galactic Council Chamber was one of the most important places in the universe. It was a massive hall filled with representatives from hundreds of species across the stars. Each species had its own unique biology, culture, and history. Some were made of metal, some had no eyes, and some could change their shape at will. But today, there was only one topic on everyone's mind: humans. Captain Daniel Carter stood in the center of the hall, feeling like a zoo animal on display. He had been sent as Earth's representative for a cultural exchange, a chance for humanity to prove itself to the wider galaxy. The meeting had started well, until someone asked the question, how do humans reproduce? Silence filled the room. Daniel blinked, surprised. Of all the things they could have asked about humans, this was not what he had expected. The question had come from a large blue-skinned alien with 6 arms and 3 glowing eyes. His species, the Vorlon, reproduced by splitting in half and growing into 2 new beings. To him, reproduction was a simple and painless process. Daniel cleared his throat. Well, human reproduction is a bit complicated. The council members leaned forward in anticipation. Some were taking notes. A floating jellyfish-like alien pulsed excitedly. Please explain, the Vorlon said. We are eager to understand. Daniel hesitated. How was he supposed to explain this without making it too awkward? He decided to keep it scientific. Humans require 2 individuals to reproduce, he said, 1 male and 1 female. They combine their genetic material to create a new life form, which grows inside the female's body for about 9 months before being born. A wave of shocked murmurs filled the chamber. The jellyfish alien turned purple, a sign of distress. A reptilian ambassador hissed in disbelief. You mean? A small, furry creature squeaked. You grow a tiny version of yourselves inside your bodies. Daniel nodded. Yes, it's called pregnancy. One of the robotic ambassadors, a being made entirely of metal and circuits, buzzed in confusion. This is highly inefficient. Why not simply construct new units in a factory like we do? Well, humans don't work that way, Daniel said. We don't build our children. They develop naturally, with their own unique features and personalities. The council exploded into chaos. Some aliens were fascinated. Others looked horrified. One large, plant-like being slowly waved its leaves. Fascinating, it whispered. Such an unpredictable method. And yet, it seems effective. A small, insectoid alien, whose species laid thousands of eggs at once, twitched its antennae. Wait. You are saying that humans only produce 1 offspring at a time? Usually, Daniel said. Sometimes twins or triplets, but most of the time, just 1. The insectoid alien nearly fell off its seat. How do you survive as a species? We lay 5,000 eggs at once, and even then, only a few make it. Daniel shrugged. Humans are very protective of their young. We take care of them, teach them, and help them grow until they can take care of themselves. Silence. The entire council was now staring at him. A reptilian alien narrowed its yellow eyes. You mean, you do not abandon your offspring after birth? Of course not. Daniel said, human parents raise their children for years, sometimes even decades. The jellyfish alien let out a high-pitched noise that sounded like a scream. A tentacled ambassador whispered, impossible. No species invests that much time into their young. The Vorlon representative looked deeply disturbed. You mean you form emotional bonds with your offspring? Yes, Daniel said. We love them. The chaos that followed was worse than before. One alien fainted. Another one, a bird-like creature, flapped its wings in panic. They develop emotional connections before reproduction and after birth. How do you even function? A robotic ambassador, trying to process the information, muttered. This explains so much about human behavior, their aggression, their cooperation, their stubbornness. It all makes sense now. Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples. Look, I know this might sound strange to you, but this is just how humans work. It's completely normal for us. The Vorlon representative cleared his throat. Captain Carter, I must say, this is the most bizarre and terrifying thing I have ever heard. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Terrifying. The Vorlon nodded. Your species is not just another sentient race. You are something else entirely. You bond with your mates, you form attachments to your offspring, and you dedicate years of your lives to ensuring they grow strong. This means that humans do not just reproduce. You protect your young with everything you have. The council members looked at each other, realization dawning on their faces. Now I understand why humans are so dangerous, the reptilian ambassador muttered. A species that fights not just for survival, but for family. That is a species that will never surrender. Daniel sighed again. Great, first contact, and now we're scary. Just what I needed. As the council continued debating, Daniel folded his arms and shook his head. He had come here to make friends, not to terrify the galaxy. But deep down, he couldn't help but smirk. Captain Daniel Carter stood silently as the Galactic Council chamber buzzed with confusion, shock, and, if he wasn't mistaken, a bit of fear. He had only explained the basics of human reproduction and parenting, but the aliens reacted as if he had just declared war on the entire galaxy. The Vorlon representative, the blue-skinned, six-armed alien, looked at Daniel with deep concern. Captain Carter, he said, his three eyes glowing. I must ask, do all humans personally care for their offspring? Or is this behavior limited to only a small portion of your species? Daniel sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. No, this is normal for all humans. Parents take care of their children, teach them, protect them. It's part of who we are. The room fell into a stunned silence once again. A robotic ambassador, a floating metal sphere covered in glowing circuits, buzzed. This is illogical. Raising offspring requires energy and resources. Would it not be more efficient to abandon them and produce more instead? Daniel frowned. That might be efficient, but it wouldn't be right. Humans form strong family bonds. We don't just abandon our children. The insectoid ambassador, whose species laid thousands of eggs at once, twitched its antennae. Unbelievable. On my homeworld, the young hatch and must fend for themselves immediately. If they are strong, they survive. If they are weak, they perish. It is the way of nature. Daniel shrugged. Maybe for you. But humans don't just let our children suffer alone. We help them until they're ready to survive on their own. The room erupted into chaos again. The bird-like ambassador, a creature covered in shimmering green feathers, spread its wings. But this means that humans are emotionally attached to their offspring. Yes, Daniel said simply. The jellyfish alien turned bright red, a sign of distress. And if anything were to threaten your offspring, Daniel's expression darkened. Then we fight. Silence. The council members stared at him, their many eyes, sensors, and tentacles frozen in shock. The reptilian ambassador spoke first, his yellow eyes narrowing. You mean, you would attack those who harm your young? Daniel's voice was calm but firm. Without hesitation, the floating robot buzzed louder. So this is why humans are so tenacious in battle. Your conflicts are not just for resources or territory. You fight for something deeper. Daniel nodded. That's right. Humans don't just fight to survive. We fight to protect the people we care about. The realization spread across the chamber like a wave. The council members were no strangers to war. Every species had fought battles at some point in their history. But most wars were over land, food, or power. Few species understood the concept of fighting for family. The Vorlon representative tapped his 6 fingers against the table. This changes everything. How so? Daniel asked. The Vorlon gestured toward the other council members. Many of us have struggled to understand why humans are so resilient. Your species does not have the strongest bodies. You are not the fastest, nor do you live the longest, and yet you are feared across the stars. Feared. Daniel raised an eyebrow. I thought we were just the newcomers. The reptilian ambassador shook his head. No, humans are unpredictable. Other species conquer and rule, but you refuse to be controlled. You resist. You endure. Now we understand why. The jellyfish alien floated closer, its tendrils waving. You are not fighting for your own survival. You fight for your families, your friends, your children. Daniel crossed his arms. Yeah. So, the jellyfish pulsed. That makes you the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Daniel blinked. Wait, what? The robotic ambassador chimed in. A species that fights only for survival will eventually surrender if the cost is too high. A species that fights for resources will stop once they have enough. But a species that fights to protect its loved ones. The robot's voice deepened. That species will never stop. The reptilian ambassador nodded. And that is why no empire has ever fully conquered humanity. No matter how many battles they win, no matter how many humans they defeat, your people always return. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. He hadn't expected this conversation to turn into a discussion about why humans were terrifying. He had just been trying to explain babies. The Vorlon representative sighed, shaking his head. This also explains your strange courtship rituals. Daniel groaned. Oh no, not this again. The bird-like ambassador fluffed its feathers. You spend years forming emotional bonds before reproduction. That is unnatural. The insectoid ambassador twitched its antennae. And you only have one mate at a time. Usually, Daniel said. A small round alien with many tiny eyes shuddered. So much emotional investment. Before creating offspring. How do you even focus on survival? Daniel laughed. You know, it's not as complicated as it sounds. We form relationships, we care for each other, and we build families. It's what makes us human. The robotic ambassador processed this information. It appears that humans are not merely individuals. Your strength comes from your connections. Your ability to form bonds makes you unpredictable and difficult to defeat. The Vorlon representative sighed. Captain Carter, I came here today expecting to learn about human biology. Instead, I have learned that your species is far more complex than I ever imagined. Daniel smirked. Glad I could help. The council chamber was silent for a moment. Then, the jellyfish ambassador spoke. Captain Carter, it said carefully, if there is one thing we have learned today, it is this. Humans are not to be underestimated. Daniel chuckled. Well, as long as you don't try to hurt us, you won't have to find out just how protective we can be. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. One thing was now clear. The galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. Captain Daniel Carter leaned back slightly, watching as the Galactic Council continued to process the shocking revelations about human reproduction and parenting. Some members were still whispering to each other, their voices filled with disbelief. Others simply stared at him as if he had just revealed that humans could breathe fire. The Vorlon representative, still looking disturbed, rubbed his forehead with two of his 6 hands. Captain Carter, I must ask, you said that humans grow their offspring inside their bodies. Daniel nodded. Yeah, that's right. The jellyfish-like ambassador let out a shrill, high-pitched sound that could only be described as pure horror. And then, how do you get them out? Daniel hesitated. He had been hoping they wouldn't ask that. Well, he started, carefully choosing his words. After about 9 months, the baby is fully developed and needs to come out. The mother's body goes through a natural process to deliver the child. Silence. The reptilian ambassador's yellow eyes widened. You mean, the offspring is pushed out of the body? Yes, Daniel said. The council chamber exploded into chaos. The jellyfish ambassador turned a deep shade of blue. Impossible. That would be painful. It is, Daniel admitted, but human mothers endure it because they love their children. Another wave of horrified gasps filled the room. The insectoid ambassador trembled. You mean, The mother survives this process. Of course, Daniel said. It's difficult, but we've developed medical practices to make it safer. The small, furry alien, who had been silent until now, spoke in a shaky voice. How big is the offspring when it comes out? Daniel hesitated. Well, human babies are usually around 3 to 4 kilograms at birth. The furry alien shrieked and fainted on the spot. The robotic ambassador's lights flickered as it processed this information. Incredible. Your species is willing to endure great suffering just to bring new life into the world. This level of sacrifice is highly inefficient. And yet, it explains much about human behavior. The bird-like ambassador fluffed its feathers nervously. Most species simply lay eggs or divide into new forms. Your method is terrifying. The Vorlon representative nodded. This explains why humans have such strong bonds with their offspring. You go through great pain and effort just to bring them into existence. That kind of hardship must create a deep connection. Daniel shrugged. Well, yeah, that's part of why human families are so close. We don't just create children. We raise them, care for them, and protect them. The reptilian ambassador shuddered. And if anything threatens your young? Daniel's expression darkened. We do whatever it takes to protect them. Silence. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. They had all heard stories of human determination, of soldiers fighting even when all seemed lost, of parents going to extreme lengths to save their children. Now, it all made sense. The robotic ambassador weird. Humans are a paradox. You are fragile, yet you survive. You feel deep emotions, yet you are among the most dangerous species we have encountered. Your biological process is inefficient, yet it has made you one of the most resilient civilizations in the galaxy. Daniel smirked. I'll take that as a compliment. The jellyfish ambassador, still trembling, spoke in a weak voice. I need time to process this information. The insectoid ambassador nodded. Agreed. This has been the most disturbing cultural exchange I have ever attended. The bird-like ambassador tilted its head. And yet, I find myself admiring humans. You do not just exist. You fight for your existence from the moment you are born. The Vorlon representative sighed, rubbing his temples. Captain Carter, your explanation has changed how we see humanity. We once viewed you as unpredictable and reckless. Now we see that your strength comes from something deeper, your willingness to endure suffering for the sake of those you love. Daniel chuckled. Glad I could help. The council members sat in silence, processing everything they had learned. One thing was now clear. Humans were unlike any species in the galaxy, and the universe would never be the same again. The Galactic Council chamber was unusually quiet. After the shocking revelations about human reproduction, the various ambassadors sat in stunned silence. Some were still processing the horror of live birth, while others were whispering amongst themselves, trying to make sense of it all. Captain Daniel Carter stood in the center of the room, arms crossed, waiting for the inevitable next question. It didn't take long. The Vorlon representative, his blue skin looking the shade paler than before, finally spoke. Captain Carter, I must ask, if human mothers endure such pain to bring new life into the world, and if your species forms such deep bonds with your offspring, how far are you willing to go to protect them? Daniel raised an eyebrow. As far as it takes. The council members shifted uncomfortably. The insectoid ambassador clicked its mandibles. What do you mean by that? Daniel sighed. He had a feeling they wouldn't like the answer. Humans don't just care for their children, he explained. We defend them. If anyone tries to hurt a human child, their parents, and often the entire community, will do whatever it takes to stop them. The reptilian ambassador narrowed his yellow eyes. You mean you would retaliate? Not just retaliate, Daniel said. We will fight for them. We will die for them. And if necessary, we will kill for them. Silence. The jellyfish ambassador let out a sharp, high-pitched noise. That is horrifying. The bird-like ambassador ruffled its feathers, visibly disturbed. Such a level of devotion. It is unnatural. Daniel shrugged. To us, it's normal. If something threatens our young, we don't just walk away. The robotic ambassador's circuits flickered as it processed this. This explains much of human history. Your wars, your relentless nature. You are not just fighting for survival. You are fighting for family. The Vorlon representative shook his head in disbelief. I once heard a story about a human soldier who carried his injured friend for miles, refusing to leave him behind even in the face of certain death. I thought it was an exaggeration. It wasn't, Daniel said. That's just what we do. The council chamber was silent again, but this time, the atmosphere had changed. There was no longer just confusion or fear. There was respect. The insectoid ambassador twitched its antennae. This level of commitment to one's offspring is unheard of. In our society, the weak are left behind for the strong to survive. Your kind, however, you protect even the weakest among you. Daniel nodded. Yeah, because to us, every life matters. The bird-like ambassador tilted its head, even if it puts you at risk. Especially then, Daniel said. That's what makes us human. The jellyfish ambassador pulsed with uncertainty. So if another species were to harm a human child, what would happen? Daniel's expression turned cold. You don't want to find out. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. They had always known humans were dangerous, but now they understood why. It wasn't their weapons or their technology that made them a threat. It was their hearts. The robotic ambassador spoke again. Humans are an anomaly in the galaxy. Your bonds with your offspring and your willingness to endure suffering for them defy all logic. But I now understand why your species thrives despite the odds. The Vorlon representative nodded. And why no empire has ever managed to conquer you. Daniel smirked. Now you're getting it. The insectoid ambassador twitched. I must admit, I find your kind terrifying. But admirable, the reptilian ambassador added. The council chamber was silent once more. This time, however, it was not because of fear or disbelief. It was because the council had realized something truly profound. Humans were not the strongest species in the galaxy. They were not the fastest, nor the most intelligent, but they were the most unbreakable. And now, the entire galaxy knew it. The Galactic Council chamber was filled with an uneasy silence. Every species present had learned something unexpected about humanity, something that shook them to their core. Captain Daniel Carter remained standing in the center, arms crossed, waiting. He knew the conversation wasn't over yet. The aliens had more questions, and he was prepared to answer them. Finally, the Vorlon representative, his blue skin still looking pale, spoke. Captain Carter, I must ask something difficult. Daniel nodded. Go ahead. The Vorlon hesitated, then took a deep breath. You have explained how deeply humans care for their offspring. You have explained how far you would go to protect them. But what happens if a human loses a child? The air in the chamber seemed to grow heavier. Daniel's expression darkened. You don't want to know. The jellyfish ambassador trembled, its translucent body glowing with anxiety. We must know. This is vital information for the council. Daniel sighed. All right, but don't say I didn't warn you. The council members leaned in, listening carefully. Daniel's voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable intensity behind his words. When a human loses someone they love, especially a child, it breaks something inside them. But unlike other species, we don't just accept it and move on. We grieve, we mourn, and sometimes we seek justice. The insectoid ambassador twitched nervously. You mean revenge? Daniel's jaw tightened. Call it what you want. But if someone takes a child from a human parent, they have made an enemy for life. The robotic ambassador's lights flickered. So you are saying that grief fuels your aggression? Daniel nodded. Yeah, humans don't just feel sadness when we lose someone. We feel anger. And that anger makes us do things others wouldn't dare. The reptilian ambassador, who had always viewed humans with suspicion, now looked at Daniel with something close to respect. There are stories about humans who have lost their families and then gone on to destroy entire enemy factions. I assumed they were exaggerated. They're not, Daniel said flatly. The Vorlon representative sighed deeply. This is deeply unsettling. The jellyfish ambassador turned a shade of dark blue, a sign of worry. And what if there is no enemy to fight? What if the loss is natural? Daniel's eyes softened. Then we carry it with us, forever. The chamber fell silent again. The bird-like ambassador, who had remained quiet for most of the discussion, finally spoke. You mean to tell us that humans never let go? Daniel shook his head. Not really. We learn to live with it, but the pain never fully disappears. That's the price of love. The robotic ambassador processed this information. This explains why humans are so determined. Your emotions drive you beyond logic, beyond reason, even beyond survival itself. Daniel gave a small, sad smile. Yeah, I guess that's true. The Vorlon representative leaned forward. So you are saying that a human's greatest strength is not their intelligence, not their technology, not even their physical endurance, but their love. Daniel nodded. Exactly. The insectoid ambassador twitched its antennae. And yet, that love can turn into rage, into destruction, if something threatens it. Daniel's voice was quiet but firm. Yes. The reptilian ambassador exhaled slowly. Then I have only one conclusion. Daniel raised an eyebrow. And what's that? The reptilian's yellow eyes locked onto Daniel's. Humanity is not the strongest species in the galaxy. You are not the fastest, nor the most advanced. But you are, without a doubt, the most dangerous. Daniel smirked. Only if you give us a reason to be. The council members exchanged glances. They now understood why humans were feared across the stars. It wasn't because of their weapons. It wasn't because of their numbers. It was because nothing in the universe was more dangerous than a human with something to fight for. And now, every species in the galaxy knew it. The Galactic Council chamber had never been this silent before. The weight of Captain Daniel Carter's words still lingered in the air like a storm waiting to strike. Every ambassador present now understood a fundamental truth about humanity, something they had never considered before. They weren't just another intelligent species. They were something far more terrifying. The Vorlon representative, still pale from the last discussion, leaned forward with hesitation. Captain Carter, we have learned much about your species today. You have spoken of your love, your loyalty, and your grief. But I must ask, is there any limit to how far a human will go for those they love? Daniel exhaled slowly, his expression unreadable. There is one. The jellyfish ambassador flinched, its gelatinous body trembling. What is it? Daniel's voice was calm, but every word carried an unshakable certainty. If you harm a human child, you have crossed a line that can never be undone. Silence. A cold shiver passed through the chamber as the meaning of his words sank in. The insectoid ambassador twitched nervously. You mean, even diplomacy would fail in such a case? Daniel's eyes darkened. There would be no diplomacy. The reptilian ambassador, who had remained cautious throughout the discussion, narrowed his yellow eyes. You mean to say, humanity would declare war? Daniel shook his head. No. The council members relaxed slightly. Then Daniel continued. We wouldn't declare war. We would end it. The relief in the room vanished instantly. The robotic ambassador's circuits flickered rapidly. Clarify. Daniel's gaze swept across the room, locking eyes with every ambassador present. We would hunt down whoever was responsible. We would not stop. We would not negotiate. And we would make sure they never had the chance to hurt anyone again. The Vorlon representative swallowed hard. You mean extinction? Daniel's voice was firm. If necessary. The jellyfish ambassador let out a horrified wail. That is madness. The bird-like ambassador fluffed its feathers nervously. Such brutality. It is unheard of. Daniel didn't flinch. Not brutality. Justice. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. This was no longer just an academic discussion. This was a warning. The insectoid ambassador, still struggling to process this revelation, twitched its mandibles. And have humans done this before? Daniel's expression remained unreadable. Not yet. A deep silence filled the chamber. The reptilian ambassador exhaled. Then we are fortunate. The robotic ambassador processed the data and spoke again. Conclusion. Humanity is not driven by conquest, nor by greed. You are not expansionists. You do not seek war. But if provoked in the wrong way, you will ensure that no enemy survives. Daniel nodded. Exactly. The Vorlon representative sighed, rubbing his temples. Captain Carter, I must admit, when this meeting started, we saw humans as reckless, unpredictable, and emotional. Now I see the truth. You are dangerous, but only to those who deserve it. Daniel smirked. Glad you understand. The bird-like ambassador tilted its head. Then I ask one last question. If another species were to become humanity's ally, would they receive the same level of protection? Daniel's expression softened slightly. Of course. If you stand with us, we will stand with you, no matter what. For the first time in the entire meeting, the council members seemed hopeful. The reptilian ambassador nodded slowly. Then perhaps we should fear you less and respect you more. The Vorlon representative leaned back, his expression thoughtful. I believe this conversation has changed the way we see humanity. Forever. Daniel chuckled. Took you long enough. The council chamber fell into silence one last time. But this time, it wasn't out of fear. It was out of understanding. And from that day forward, the galaxy would never see humanity the same way again. The Galactic Council chamber was no longer filled with fear. No longer did the ambassadors look at Captain Daniel Carter as an unpredictable, reckless creature. Instead, they looked at him with something else. Understanding. For centuries, many species had underestimated humanity. They had assumed that humans were weak, fragile creatures. But today, every being in that chamber had learned the truth. Humans were dangerous. Not because of their weapons, not because of their numbers, but because of their hearts. And that made them more terrifying than any war fleet. The Vorlon representative, who had led much of the questioning, leaned forward. His blue skin had regained some color, though his expression remained serious. Captain Carter, he said slowly, I must admit, this discussion has changed my view of your species. Daniel smirked. Yeah. And what's the final verdict? The Vorlon hesitated for a moment before replying. I no longer believe humans are a threat to galactic peace, unless someone is foolish enough to force you into war. Daniel nodded. That's about right. The insectoid ambassador clicked its mandibles. Humans are unpredictable. You can show great kindness, but you can also unleash destruction beyond comprehension. It is unsettling. Daniel chuckled. Welcome to humanity. The jellyfish ambassador, who had been trembling throughout the discussion, finally spoke. I fear your species, Captain Carter, but I also admire it. I believe that no force in the universe is as terrifying or as protective as a human fighting for someone they love. Daniel's smirk faded into something more serious. That's what we do. We don't start fights, but we end them. The reptilian ambassador, who had been suspicious of humans from the beginning, now spoke with a tone of deep respect. You are not conquerors. You are not predators. You are guardians. Daniel crossed his arms. Sounds about right. The robotic ambassador, who had processed every word with flawless precision, gave its final analysis. Conclusion. Humanity is not to be challenged lightly, but they are also valuable allies. If one earns a human's loyalty, they have gained an unbreakable bond. The bird-like ambassador ruffled its feathers. And if one earns a human's hatred, Daniel's voice was cold. They won't live long enough to regret it. Silence. Not out of fear, but out of respect. The Vorlon representative sighed. Captain Carter, I will bring this discussion to the Council officially. I believe our policies regarding humanity must be adjusted. Daniel grinned. Good, because we're not going anywhere. The insectoid ambassador twitched. I admit, I am grateful that humanity chooses to be protectors rather than conquerors. But tell me, Captain Carter, what drives humans to be this way? Why do you care so deeply for those you love? Daniel's expression softened. Because that's what makes life worth living. It's not about power. It's not about wealth. It's about the people we care about. Everything we do, everything we fight for, it's for them. The council chamber fell silent one last time. The ambassadors had learned a valuable lesson today. Humans were not invincible. They could be hurt, they could bleed, they could die. But if you threatened the ones they loved, they would become unstoppable. And now, the galaxy knew.